You kind of mostly talk about this kind of combination of somatic experiencing and non-dual. And so how did you sort of find these things once after you introduce yourself? That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Like many of us, I feel like I've lived many lives in this lifetime. So it's hard to know even where to start. But I was brought up in a Hindu family, which is already quite a bit of non-duality in there. But my stepmom actually is very much into Vedanta, and she introduced that to me. And when I was a teenager, I was 17 and she's like, Nina, you really need to learn about Vedanta. Like, that's where it's at. I was like, okay. And, she had these books and I would flip through and I was like, this is really good. But I didn't really go in too deep. And then I went to physical therapy school for college. And, all you do is study. You just everything else gets blocked out. So
Hmm.
those 4 years, just, I'm going to just skip over. I just studied a lot. And then after that, I went to a Vedanta lecture in Chicago. I think I was 23. I think it was right after that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this was incredible. And then the year after, when I was 24, I moved out to California and I would go to the SF Vedanta Center a lot. And it was just, amazing. And I didn't think anything of it like this is my path, nothing. I was like, oh, I just love these talks, really speaks to me. And then I ended up moving back to my hometown, Indianapolis, when I was 32. And well, actually, right before I moved back, that's when I started studying somatic experiencing. So I'll tell you how I got into that. I had been rear ended on the highway in California twice, and I had this neck issue, this whiplash issue. And I am a PT, right? So I was trying all these PT things for 2 years and nothing got it. And I was at a health fair in Berkeley where I was living, and this chiropractor was there. And I was just chatting with him. I was like, can you just look at my neck real quick? I feel like something's off. And he didn't check it. He just said to me, he's like, did you ever think it was psychological? And I was like, how is that possible? Like, I was physically hit at high speeds both times,
Mhm.
And then he's like, well, do you think you could have looked in the rearview mirror and saw you were going to get hit and you tensed up? And I was like, maybe. And I knew as a PT, drunk drivers sustain less injuries than sober drivers. And I knew there was something to what he was saying, but that's the only fact I had. But it
Hmm.
was enough that I was like, okay, what do you think I should do? And he said, well, I have a somatic experiencing practitioner that works in my office. Why don't you come see her? And I was like, I don't even know what that is, but okay, I'll do it. And so I went and I saw her. She's still my friend to this day.
Cool.
By the second session, we worked the event. By the second session, my neck pain was 75% gone. This blew my mind. As a PT, I had only been trained mechanically. I had never been trained emotionally. I was so emotionally repressed myself at that
Mhm.
age. And I just, I had no conceptual framework for what just happened. So I enrolled in the program. I was like,
Mhm.
okay, I just need to figure out what happened here. So I'm going to enroll in the SE program. So I started it while I was still there. I started in Berkeley. And then I ended up moving back here, but I would fly back and forth to do the program there. And then I continued in Chicago from here. And then I finished up in California again. But that was my somatic journey. And then every year I was like, I'm not going to practice. I'm just going to do this to learn about myself and heal my traumas. And then by the end of it, I was like, this is my life. Like, this
Yeah.
is, I can't believe I even fell into this. Like, I was trained so conventionally,
Hmm.
but I am so grateful I fell into this. And so then I was trying to start my practice here in Indianapolis. And all the SEPs told me, they're like, yeah, it takes about 5 years to start a practice. So I was still working as a PT. And then I started working part time PT, part time SE. And after 5 years, my practice still wasn't off the ground. Like I had some people, but not enough to go full time.
Hmm.
And then I thought, let me just put one video on YouTube because people are always asking me what this even is because I'm in the
Hmm.
middle of the country. No, within a 300-mile radius, there was no one doing
Right.
what I did. So I was like, okay, so when people ask me what I do, I'll just tell them to go watch this video. So I asked my friend and we made it, we put it up. And then I just forgot about it for a year. And I didn't understand YouTube. I didn't understand anything. And I was like, "Oh, people are commenting on this thing. Oh, I have subscribers? What?" Like, and then after a year, someone asked me to speak locally, and I did that, and then they sent me the footage, and I was like, "Oh, maybe I should just put this on my channel." And I just kept forgetting I had a channel and just randomly, and so then a few years ago, I was like, "Oh, I should do this seriously and share this." But I will backtrack a little bit. So after the SE program, which was an amazing program, I actually felt worse in some ways. I felt better in some ways. I had released a lot of emotions, but mentally, I felt worse about trauma. I felt like, oh my God, I didn't know I had 200 different traumas. They
Sure.
told us
Yeah.
all of these things can be trauma. Oh my gosh. And you just kind of realize like all the things that you went through, that people go through, and what kind of effect it could have. And so I became trauma identified. I had what I call now trauma ego, where, oh my gosh, all these things happened to me, and this is really bad, and I need to heal, and I'm the individual, separate self person trying to make it in this world, trying to heal her trauma. And I was very lucky to meet a non-dual teacher the year after I graduated from the SE program. We did some somatic non-dual stuff. So I did the somatic work. So I feel very led down this
Mhm.
path. I don't really feel like I consciously chose it the way I chose PT, which I still like. But that non-duality opened up the perspective for me. It just opened up everything that, wow, there's so much more about my identity than what happened to me. And
Mhm.
nothing that happened to me can define me. So I started integrating that into my practice. And then, you know, in YouTube. So
Mhm.
I think that's a bit of a long summary. I did other things along the path with yoga and other trauma modalities, but I'll pause here to see where you
Yeah.
want to.
No, that's great. Yeah, there's so many so many places to go. I guess I'm curious as like a short question before jumping off into maybe something about non-dual.
Yeah.
As graduated from the SE school, was that something that you could combine with the PT? Like, were you able to use those in tandem as you were learning it, sort of?
I did, what I would do, so for example, if someone came in with tense shoulders and we needed to see, well, is that physical? Is that postural that your
Hmm.
shoulders are like that? Is it a muscle imbalance? Or is it stress? Is that where you hold your stress? So I would do a PT evaluation and I would give them the postural requirements, the exercises, all of that stuff, because I didn't want to pretend that SE is a silver bullet.
Hmm.
It's not. There's so many other things that could be contributing to somebody's symptoms. So we might as well cover the bases.
Hmm.
So that was an example of where I felt like, okay, as long as I got that out of the way, make sure there's nothing, really out of the ordinary physically, give them a good
Hmm.
program, then I felt good about doing the SE with them.
Hmm.
So that's an example of how I would put them together.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. And so, yeah, I think for anyone listening who's not familiar with SE, like I have talked about it, but there's a lot of, good content online. And it came from Peter Levine, who's kind of I call him like one of the trauma forefathers of our like culture in terms of like exploring and understanding that. But I'm curious to hear, like, in your words, how you would define or describe like the non-dual path.
Yeah, and maybe what I'll do, if it's okay with you, let me define SE first too
Sure.
for
Okay.
those, and then I'll go into the non-duality. So, somatic experiencing is based on the study of wild animals, where Peter Levine would notice he's like, why are these wild animals not getting traumatized the same way that domesticated animals are? And he studied this, and he realized they are following their fight or flight instincts, and when they do so, they are discharging the trauma or the stored enemy and the stored energy from their enemy, from their predator,
Hmm.
usually the prey. And so they would store this and then they would shake it off afterwards. However, domesticated animals were trained to go against their instincts. They were trained to obey. So they were more at risk for this trauma to keep stored in their body. And they would have these trauma reactions for years afterwards. And then, humans were the most domesticated of all. So we have tons of different adaptive ways of being with emotion, repressing it, overthinking and adding story to it. And so the somatic experiencing is about getting into our felt experience and really allowing whatever didn't get to happen to now express, whether that's just grief and crying, whether that's a defensive response, whether that's a fight or flight response, whether that's coming out of a freeze response from something. So that is a summary of what the somatic
Hmm.
experience work is about. And then I'll go into non-duality. And within non-duality, I learned and developed some somatic or non-dual somatic techniques, which are different than somatic experiencing. So I do want to
Hmm.
differentiate that. The non-duality is really about what is true. Like, what do I know for sure is true, and what is the absolute truth of who I am and the world and everything. And it's a very logical way of looking at it and investigating it. My teacher, Ryan, he studied Western philosophy actually for a decade in coming to this path. And my way was through my culture. But non duality is found in all of the major religions and cultures in the world in some way. In Christianity, you can find it in A Course in Miracles. In Islam, it's in Sufism. In Buddhism is non-dual. Hinduism, Vedanta. It's in so many cultures and expressions because and then Western philosophy as well, because everyone's trying to figure out, like, what's going on here. What's the
Hmm.
truth and who am I? And so with Western philosophy there was a lot of like deduction of like, okay, who are we? So if God made the world and there was nothing before him or her, nothing else existed, then what material would there be to make us? And wouldn't that have to be that the material was himself, and that's that's why he's in all of us and we're made in his image? And so that's that more Western sort of
Hmm.
framework. Um, and then Eastern would be more like, what is the self? And with the capital S or the small s. And so in Buddhism, they're saying there's no self, but they're referring to the small s. There's no separate self, there's no permanent ego identity. It's always changing. And we
Hmm.
can think about how our personalities have changed over the years. And that would be the ego identity, is the personality, who we think we are, which is a
Hmm.
concept, um, different emotions and behaviors attached to that. But the self with the big S is like, what is the absolute identity? And in Western philosophy, they refer to this as the absolute. So this is what my teacher Ryan refers to it as, but you can also say self with the big S. So that is that our identity has to be everything.
Right.
and and there's a way to get to that investigation, but it's basically the that we are the infinite consciousness that is inhabiting every single one of us, every single tree and rock and animal, and it's all the same consciousness. It's not unique to each of us. It's the same, and it's all connected. We're all connected, and we're basically embodying these separate seeming mind body units that are having unique experiences, but we are connected, and it's impossible for us to be separate. We can feel separate, but we're not
Hmm.
separate. I'll just pause here. So the truth is oneness. That's non
Hmm.
duality. It's a long way of saying the truth is oneness.
I agree with that as well. And I think it's It's such a interesting thing to explore from like an embodied state, and then also, with our minds as an idea and concept as well. And I guess I'm curious, like, what you think if we're talking about this oneness, this universal consciousness that births all things, planets and stars and trees and butterflies and humans and stuff. Like, what are your thoughts around like that and love? Are they the same energy, or is love like a unique flavor of that energy?
It's a really good question. I've asked my teacher the same question. His response is that it's not love, that when teachers say it's all love, it's that they're feeling that love inside of them and they're projecting that onto everything and saying that it is. Um, I've experienced it in so many different ways, and I'm never going to be able to experience it in its totality while I have this veil over me in this material world.
Hmm.
But I've experienced it as love. I've experienced it as peace, as silence, as bliss. Ryan and I both, so sorry for everyone who's, Ryan listed my teacher's name is also Ryan.
Yeah.
So Ryan and I both prefer peace over bliss. For me personally, I went in and out of bliss for 20 years before I had the wisdom that, from my teacher. And it's a lot easier to get things done when you're at peace than in bliss. I laid around doing nothing for hours and days. But yeah, so I've experienced it in so many ways that I wouldn't be able to say from my direct experience, oh, it's always love. That's what it is. I think different people experience it in different ways, but there's always this flavor to it that you can recognize where there's no desire,
Hmm.
there's zero desire, there's peace, whether it's a blissful peace, whether it's a loving peace, like you're just at
Hmm.
peace, you're self fulfilled, nothing is missing
Hmm.
in that state. So that's my answer from my direct experience. I'm sure, Vedantic philosophers can answer so much better as far as what it is.
No, I mean, I think it's great to have, obviously like certain schools or cultures ideas and like a sort of like more collective idea of what it is. But then having everyone's individual flavor and experiences is so important too, because ultimately as humans we have this unique experience. And so I think the more of those that are talked about, the more people are, oh, I didn't really connect with that person's description of it, but this person's I do. And because for me, this idea of love being that energy, that sort of universal consciousness, like I have memories of, you know, intense, intimate, relational love, especially when I was young. And it's like, it's more like acute and fiery almost. Whereas now when I have these experiences, I recognize it as love, but it's more like supreme ultimate okayness and like safety and peace, I think, like you said. It's not the same sort of like explosive type of experience of love. It's more of just like this steady flow the more we're able to open up to that, which is really what something like SE and, cultivating all this kind of work is hopefully allowing us to allow greater flow of this consciousness through us without blockages. And the blockages distort our perspective and manifest in
Yeah,
interesting ideas in the mind.
absolutely. And that love would be without attachment, right? Because a
Yeah.
lot of times we can confuse that, especially when we're younger. And sometimes that can be part of the fiery or
Hmm.
maybe not for everyone. But I thought of a more objective answer to your question. So it's often thought of as this infinite consciousness is often thought of as infinite potential.
Hmm.
That could be more the objective answer, but then subjectively experienced in multiple ways because of the
Yeah.
potentiality. Yeah.
Yeah, like I guess one of my main teachers that I had for a few years, he talked about like our body and our kind of human self as like our chief instrument in a way. And so like the more tuned and clean and open that is, that energy flows through us and expresses uniquely. And to the most that we can feel safe and trust and allow that to happen, to me would be self-realization, I guess, or something in that regard where we know we are the oneness, we experience our humanness, and we trust and feel okay and peaceful enough to allow the what seems scary flow of this energy to come through us.
Yeah, and some of that energy will be our traumas. Some of that energy will be what's underneath our traumas.
Hmm.
My teacher has cleared out so much. All that's left for him is the four immeasurables in Buddhism. So his baseline is equanimity, sympathetic joy, meaning if you're happy, he's so happy for you,
Mm.
compassion, and loving kindness, metta.
Yeah,
And he says those are the true emotions rather than the ones that the ego creates through believing in certain things.
yeah,
So yeah, all this stuff gets kind of dumped out when our mind is silent with the self-realization.
yeah. No, that makes sense for sure. Something I thought of too when you were speaking about like the lowercase s self and how, different like schools say like there is no self. The self is an illusion. And then as the sort of capital S self and we're connected to the oneness and that is everything, that would also like include the lowercase
Yes,
self, right?
yes,
So do
yes,
you feel like that is like a good metaphor for kind of this journey in a way where it's like we have to recognize, oh, there is a lowercase self. Oh, there is no self. And then, oh, here's the actual self. Oh, and that includes the small self.
absolutely. Absolutely. You just named kind of the three levels. So
Mm,
I'll expand on that a little bit. So yeah, when we are, before we're consciously awake to our experience, we might just identify with everything. I think I am my body, I think I am my emotions, I think I am my thoughts. And so maybe we'll call that this baseline level where we're identified with the things that we are in fact not. And then that next level would be to see, wait a minute, what are all the things that I'm not? So, for those listening on audio, I'm holding up a pen in front of me. So, if I can look at this pen, can I be this pen? Or do I have to be the one who is looking at the
mhm,
pen? I can never be the object of my attention. I have to always be the subject of it. So, this second level is still a dualistic place to be, but it's essential before going to the next one because I need to see and investigate for myself like neti neti, I'm not this, I'm not that. Okay, I can't be my thoughts, I can't be my emotions, I can't be my body because of this, and this. We go into that investigation. I can't be my body because it has all different cells than 7 years ago.
mhm,
It looks totally different than when I was a baby. When this body passes, no one's going to say Nina is still here. So I can't be this body. So we go through that investigation for every single thing, anything that pulls you back. Yeah, but it really feels like I'm this. Okay, but am I? Let's look logically. If I if it is my identity, it must have duration. For anything to have identity, it has to have this duration. Otherwise, it's simply a process. So if anything is coming and going, it can't be me because
mhm,
I've been here this whole time, but all these processes are changing. So that's the second level. And when eventually you get to the place of I'm the witness. Okay, so I'm the one observing, I'm the one watching, which is still ego, but it's the smallest form of ego and it's essential. Well, not everyone thinks it's essential. Actually, my teacher Ryan thinks you can skip this, but I tried to skip it and it didn't work and I had to come back to it. So his other student, Aloshan, who I have interviews with on my channel, he's like, no, you have to do. So that's where they both disagree. But so I had to go there back.
mhm,
And then once you stay in this witness consciousness, this witness state, and it feels like you still have a center, it still feels like you are centered around this awareness in this witness consciousness. And then the longer you stay there, the center can drop where you don't have a localized consciousness anymore. It's a non-localized consciousness, and you don't have to live there, but you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I'm actually all of this. Because if the ego dissolves enough, there's nothing separating your perception. So, for example, at that third top level, if I'm looking inward and the ego is not there, I'm nothing. There's nothing here. It's like with the Buddhist no self, like there's nothing. But if I look externally, because there's no separation, no separate self identity to identify with, it feels like I'm everything. It feels like I'm all of this.
Hmm.
So that would be kind of those three levels.
Yeah.